Well, good evening. This is my third trip this last year coming to Israel, and I just want to say the hospitality and the beauty every time amazes me. Every time I leave Washington and am fortunate enough to be hosted by my good friends in the national security and the law enforcement ministries is just fantastic, and I can't say how much I enjoy my visits here. And my good friend, Dr. Glawe, I just have to say, Professor, our friendship and relationship over the last year and a half has been inspiring to me on what a subject matter expert you've had, been 30-plus years in terrorism, in our discussions regarding hate crimes and the hybrid of terrorism and the similarities of how they both are, and that discussion on an international level has to occur in that hybrid arena. And I'm going to talk about it more in my speech today. But I want to also echo what my comrades from the United States said, is thank you for the service to our men and women in law enforcement, fire, medical, the military services, the intelligence services, as well as the citizens, the public. Your devotion to counterterrorism is inspiring to me. After 18 years after 9/11 and over 27 years in law enforcement, the goal that I have, the goal as the Undersecretary, the head of intelligence for the Department of Homeland Security, is to prevent the worst day from happening in someone's life. And that doesn't matter if it's in the United States or abroad. It's very simple. What I try to do with my team and inspire and drive myself is to prevent the worst day from happening in someone's life. And that is our goal and objectives in all of our U.S. law enforcement, national security apparatus, military, and my organization. But again, I want to thank Professor Glawe. Thank you for the International Institute for Counterterrorism again, and to our Israeli host, as I mentioned. It's incredible to come here every year, or actually 3 times this year. Tomorrow marks 18 years since the most catastrophic terrorist attack in the United States, and in the beginning of our generational fight against terrorism. The terrorist attacks forever altered the skyline in New York City, the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and of course the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The attacks cut short thousands of lives and touched an entire generation who experienced the shock and evil of terrorism. The loss was felt by an entire civilized world. Citizens of 78 countries died in New York, Shanksville, and Arlington. And it was felt by those all too familiar with the horrors of terrorism through their own experience. The physical effects of 9/11 are still being felt by those that survived, and the brave men and women who responded to help their fellow citizens. It's the same call to service and dedication that drew me and so many here in this room to embark on this professional pursuit, to ensure we never experience that day again. I had the honor of addressing this gathering last year and spoke about my own journey of 27 years in law enforcement and national security. I spoke at how it shaped my vision and how we can leverage intelligence and partnership to keep our communities safe. I'm passionate about this topic because I've seen firsthand the devastation of violence in our communities. And I'm motivated to prevent the worst day from happening in someone's life. As we mentioned earlier, I began my career in Texas as the youngest patrol officer in Houston. It was the homicide capital of the United States. I transferred to Aurora, Colorado, and in April of 1999, I was one of the Metro's area first responders to Columbine. Following the September 11 attacks, I joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I was fortunate to lead an incredible team of individuals in the tactical and strategic fight against East Africa Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab in the Horn of Africa. Our successes would not have been possible without the partnerships in this room, the international community, and especially our Israeli partners in the military and intelligence services. I now have the honor to serve as the Undersecretary, Chief Intelligence Officer, and Counterterrorism Coordinator for the Department of Homeland Security, which is comprised of 22 organizations and the 3rd largest department in the U.S. government. With tremendous bipartisan support under the leadership of George W. Bush, we formed the department in 2003. It brought together 22 agencies, as I mentioned, the United States Coast Guard, the U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Transportation Security Administration, I jumped the gun there, and Federal Emergency Management Agency. The Department of Homeland Security is a continually evolving organization with a broad mission. The counterterrorism and the homeland security threats, securing the American borders, securing cyberspace and critical infrastructure, preserving and upholding the nation's prosperity and economic security, strengthening our preparedness and resiliency. Our daily operations are staggering. We process over 1 million passengers a day. I'm sorry, we process over 1 million people transiting the U.S. borders in the marine, air, and land environment, over 200,000 privately owned vehicles, and over 70,000 pieces of cargo. We screen for immigration benefits, block cyber intrusions, investigate a wide range of homeland security threats, and conduct enforcement operations. Every day, the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security protect our communities and save lives through their actions. As President Trump stated, border security is national security. Border security is national security. As we approach the 20th anniversary of September 11th, I take note, the youngest members of our workforce, our intelligence analysts, our special agents, our case officers, our newest servicemen and women, police, fire, emergency medical service, and some people in this room have no direct memory of 9/11. They have no memory of the concerns we had for our families and friends, nor the confusion and the dread we felt Tuesday morning and the days to follow. They don't remember how we worked to understand the threat, identify those responsible, and marshal the international resources for the long fight to come. They have no experience with how we fundamentally changed the way we did business, how we brought intelligence and operations together in a synergy of policy, strategic, and tactical operations, and used intelligence collection and dissemination to mitigate threat. It's our duty as leaders who do remember to teach those lessons learned, to mentor those that are coming up. A visit to Israel provides the opportunity to reflect on the most extreme horrors experienced by the Jewish people, affirm our commitment to never forget, and to stand with Israel as a beacon of hope and protection. The United States stands with Israel and our global partners in the civilized world against the current manifestations of terrorism. Today we reflect on a greatly diminished al-Qaeda, the death of Osama bin Laden, and other senior al-Qaeda leaders. Only 4 years ago, ISIS threatened to engulf the Middle East in the perpetual conflict. It has lost its so-called caliphate as a result of our global counter-ISIS coalition. But the fight against ISIS continues as its dark message of hatred and intolerance still resonates to extremists, and al-Qaeda has also proven resilient. The horrific attacks in Sri Lanka are a persistent reminder of this threat. We must continue counterterrorism, counter-radicalization, and our international partners to disrupt foreign fighters and terrorist organizations. Aviation remains the crown jewel of threats. And as the head of intelligence for the Department of Homeland Security, the Transportation Security Administration falls underneath me as far as the intelligence. I can assure you that they still want to take airlines out of the sky. I want to personally thank the Israeli intelligence service and military for their partnership to keep the skies safe. We could not do it without their help. Without continued pressure and concerted international cooperation, violent Islamist extremism, as exemplified by al-Qaeda and ISIS, will direct and facilitate complex international attacks again. With a sustained commitment, the international community can move closer to our ultimate goal of defeating and destroying these poisonous movements. Turning to Iran. Our progress against ISIS was made possible with a coalition of global partners. The world today is faced with a challenge that will require the same level of cooperation and resolve. Iran's support for terrorism and its partnership with the deadly terrorist organization Hezbollah is a threat Israel knows all too well. 36 years ago, the United States was attacked by Lebanese Hezbollah in the 1983 Marine barracks bombing. Recent events remind us of the present danger this organization poses, especially to Israel. Iran's continued supply of missiles and rockets and attempts to transfer advanced technology to Hezbollah cannot be tolerated and demand strong cooperation and resolve. Iran's support extends to other terrorist organizations, including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Iran is faced with a choice: to join the ranks of civilized and responsible nations, give up its destabilizing activity, and renounce its embrace of technology that threatens countries throughout the region. Iran has chosen to retreat into violence, paranoia, and dangerous brinkmanship. It fails to deliver for its people. Iran's actions enrich a culture of elites at the expense of proud and talented people yearning for freedom. The world can no longer tolerate Iran's destabilizing activities, its cyber warfare, its efforts to cause social and political unrest, nor its terrorist activity. The malign activity must cease. Here, Israel is at the front lines on the fight against terror. In my visits to Israel, I have had the opportunity to meet with the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli National Police, and their intelligence service. I recognize a shared commitment with the men and women of the Department of Homeland Security to defend our countries and share information with our international partners. I've seen this same dedication by security professionals and first responders from our partners around the world working every day to protect their communities. Now, moving on to the Department of Homeland Security Counterterrorism and Violence Prevention Axis. What are we doing? At the Department of Homeland Security, we are committed to the relentless and resilient and striving to prevent future attacks against the United States and our partners. We have realigned our intelligence resources and launched several initiatives to assist our security partners and prevent violent acts. As the virtual world provides insulation for the violent extremists and blunts our best tools of radicalization, including traditional off-ramps such as family, peer, and law enforcement interventions, early threat identification becomes more critical. I'm going to take a few moments to talk about the department and what we are doing to assist our partners. Although these examples come from the United States government, the broad challenges we face are similar to our international partners. Isolated data sets and intelligence sharing, lack of cooperation between prevention, intelligence, and law enforcement organizations, lack of traditional terrorism indicators, and partnership with the private sector. I share the following initiatives from our experience in the United States and hope they may enhance our international partners and efforts to identify threats and mitigate them. As Dr. Glawe said earlier, hate crimes, hate-inspired violence, and terrorism are combined on some level. That discussion has to continue. We have created the Counterterrorism Mission Center. As the Undersecretary for the Department, as I mentioned earlier, I serve as the Chief Intelligence Officer and also the Chief Information Sharing Officer for the Department. I leverage these authorities to realign our entire intelligence apparatus to mitigate threats. We took best practices to bring together critical skill sets in a team of teams approach into the mission centers focused on our priority threats, including terrorism. Over the past year, the work of our Counterterrorism Mission Center has kept us safe, providing actionable intelligence to our partners to mitigate real-time threats. We have created a 24/7 open source collection team, not focused on cases, but open source against threats against persons and property, not specifically focused on terrorism, focused on the behavioral indicators of violence. To identify these threats to life and property, no matter what the motivation, as I mentioned, we created a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week capability. The team disseminates threat information and tactical reports across the U.S. government and also to the private sector. The reports have led to arrests of individuals threatening to conduct school shootings and kill law enforcement. We are investing significant capital and resources in information sharing and capability to identify these threats in the open source arena. Through this important work, we are committed to maintaining the trust of our citizens with strict privacy and civil liberty protections and oversights. The Homeland Security Information Network. How do we share this information when we get it? One of the consistent challenges we all face is sharing information intelligence, even with our trusted partners. To address this, we developed a secure internet system called the Homeland Security Information System, which includes communities of interest from our Homeland Security partners, including our state and local law enforcement and private sector critical infrastructure. Our law enforcement portal currently holds over 40,000 intelligence products, with over 8,000 products shared fiscally, and our views are up 325% from 2017 to 2018. To give you an example, we had 17,000 views in the site in 2017. Last year we had 68,000. This year we'll have over 100,000 views. So it's all about the clicks. And most of the reports that the open source team access, and most of the reports that are accessed, 56% of them, are based on those real-time threat indicators that I mentioned earlier. This is one of our best practices of collaborations. Suspicious activity reporting. The men and women of the Department of Homeland Security are also focused on helping our partners identify and share leads on the Homeland Security threats. We are continually improving our suspicious activity reporting training in the quality and accessibility. We are focused now on the behavioral indicators and less on the ideology. As a result, in fiscal year 2018, we conducted nearly 42,000 trainings for our state, local, and private sector, and a 25% increase from 2017. This program is in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Behavioral Analysis Unit, the United States Secret Service, as well as our private sector partners. We are focused on behaviors that involve hate or violence. We are further increasing our training as well and hope to have 55,000 additional trainings. It will be mandated now if you're part of the emergency management system or first responders and you're receiving grant money from the U.S. government and the state and local law enforcement, you will be required to have completed this training in your department. Computer-aided dispatch, the CAD systems. In the United States, we call it the 911 systems. I earlier today met with Minister Erdon, who covers your national police, and we discussed in detail how we're looking at the vulnerabilities and the additional data that can be exploited on violent ideology or violent extremism that our first responders come in contact every day. As I mentioned, I met with Minister Erdon, the Minister of Public Security, and we spoke about this common problem. Regardless of a location, most police, fire, and medical personnel respond to emergency calls. As I mentioned, in the United States, this is called a 911 call. Computer-aided dispatch assists with the process, providing first responders with the basic details for a call for service. It could be a welfare check, it could be a mental health patient, it could be a terrorism, it could be an active shooter at a high school or other institution. We're focused on leveraging the technology of integrating systems, especially within these CAD systems. Our aim is to help our partners identify individuals at risk in their communities for creating violence acts and create opportunities through artificial intelligence to interdict them before that act occurs. This effort is at the forefront of integrating diverse sets of data across our agencies and governments to keep our communities safe. The National Vetting Center. This initiative was set by President Trump via executive order to protect our citizens from the threat of terrorism. The National Vetting Center provides a collaborative and interagency effort to look at many data sets to identify those at-risk individuals that are going to commit a nefarious attack in the United States. The department and our interagency partners lacked a unified approach. The center provides a platform for integrated data and collaboration to identify threats posed by individuals attempting to travel to the United States or use our immigration services. It allows our partners to compute unique information and improves the way data is exploited to identify unknown threats and inform operational decisions. This also ensures our compliance with applicable laws and policy while maintaining robust privacy and civil liberty protections. The necessity to harness technology and share information between international partners is critical to preventing future terrorist attacks. We've seen how critical it is to disrupting the flow of foreign fighters, preventing terrorists from reaching safe havens, and ultimately dismantling terrorist networks. And we must continue to raise our capacity to identify known and unknown terrorists through watch lists and the use of intelligence analysis. Hate-inspired violence against any race, religion, or sexual orientation cannot be tolerated. Terrorism is terrorism, whether domestic or international, and violent threats to our freedom and the basic tenets to a free society must be eliminated. Ultimately, our goal and our role as leaders is to harness that same dedication of mission as those who experienced the call after 9/11 and for that tragic event on that day. Provide them with the tools to combat an ever-evolving, determined, and persistent threat. When I visit those working to keep our country safe, whether at a fusion center, a boarding car, a border crossing, or a Coast Guard cutter, and when I look around this room, I am filled with a sense of optimism and hope that the progress we've made in these 18 years is just the beginning, and that our children will only hear of the horrors, and that that day, rather than feel the pain themselves. This hope will only be realized by close cooperation between the United States, Israel, and our international partners in our counterterrorism fight. I want to thank you for your service, thank you for your opportunity to speak with you today, and thank you for your continued vigilance in this fight. Thank you.